Welcome to Hannity. All right, tonight, a lot of ground we're going to cover, including the president's new executive order. More lawlessness, shockingly, in Seattle. But we do have video that will shock you from a gruesome assault in New York City and much more tonight. We begin with some good news. My heart's not as troubled. How do you like that? Good news. We need good news. It looks like tonight we can say that a robust V-shaped economic recovery might, looking good, be underway. According to brand new numbers, look at this. Retail sales in the month of May broke all expectations, rising by nearly 18%. Now, that's double the most recent forecast, and it is the highest monthly gain in the history of the U.S. Let me repeat that. That is the highest monthly gain in the history of our country. Now, it's now very clear, as more than ever, that in 140 days, we, the people, we face a pivotal moment. Just saying that to Mark Levin on his radio show. This is a crossroads election. Capitalism, socialism, peace through strength, appeasement, open borders, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, secure borders, government takeover of industry and confiscating wealth, or free markets and energy independence and constitutionalists on the bench. A lot at stake in 140 days. Now, we're going to continue to also make economic progress with the president's pro-growth agenda, and we're going to descend into the always predictable, always. In my new book, Live Free or Die, I go into the failures of socialism. They want to repeat what we know will fail, and a simple abacus or calculator would show them that, but they don't care. How did Obamacare work out for you? Now, as we count down to Election Day, ask yourself this question. In Biden's 4+ decades as a senator, 8 years as vice president, what did he ever do to help improve the lives of we, the American people, all Americans? What did Joe and Barack do to improve police, community relations, when they held the highest offices in the land for 8 years? Did they improve relations after the riots in Ferguson, Missouri? Ask yourself. Did they improve them after the riots in Baltimore, Maryland, Freddie Gray? Did they improve them by inflaming tensions, Cambridge police, and many other incidents? Nope, of course not. They fanned the flames, rushed to judgment. They vilified police officers. And in case after case after case, their rush to judgment was wrong. And as for solutions, what did they do? Nothing. And by the way, you think about this. Did Barack, Joe, they do anything to improve the quality of life for Americans, especially minority Americans that live in some of America's biggest cities run by Democratic governors and mayors for decades and decades? Did they improve the school system? At the end of the Obama-Biden administration, guess what? Third highest per capita spending city in America, Baltimore. In Baltimore, they had 13 public high schools that had 0 students proficient in math. 0. Meanwhile, in Obama's hometown, we watched the violence all throughout the 8 years he was president. Violent crime exploded, and he barely mentioned it like a few times. That's it. Did he do anything? No. In 2009 to 2016, 4,000 Americans were murdered in his own hometown city, the Windy City. So many thousands of others injured. In virtually every major liberal city in the country, we see a similar trend. Not hard to figure out. Violent crime way up in Los Angeles. New York, way up. Minneapolis, way up. Crime spiraling out of control in almost every major Democratic-run city and state. But unlike Barack and Joe, finally, we have a president that is willing to take action. We're going to compare and contrast the president's full record of accomplishment coming up tonight. But we start with the president's brand new order on policing. By the way, things that Joe and Barack never did. Take a look.
Americans believe we must support the brave men and women in blue who police our streets and keep us safe. Americans also believe we must improve accountability, increase transparency, and invest more resources in police training, recruiting, and community engagement. That is why today I'm signing an executive order encouraging police departments nationwide to adopt the highest professional standards to serve their communities. They are great men and women. When others run away from danger, police run straight into harm's way, often putting their lives at stake to protect someone who they don't know or never even met.
Now, with this executive order today, President Trump is increasing police accountability with a nationwide database that documents excessive use of force claims. By the way, impactful in both the Floyd situation and what happened in Atlanta, both times. The order also sets guidelines for police transparency. It bans the use of chokeholds unless an officer's life is at risk. Then, guess what? All holds barred to save your life. During their 8 years in office, Barack, Joe, they didn't do one of these things, not a single one. And unlike Barack and Joe, President Trump is actually, he's talking to everyone, incorporating all sides into his policy decisions. And earlier today, even one former Obama official actually had, shockingly, surprisingly, but rightfully, praise for the president. Take a look.
There were a number of families there who spoke directly with the president, with Barr, Attorney General Barr, and also with Tim Scott, and all those law enforcement people were there listening, and they basically just told their stories, which apparently, according to the people I talked to, there were tears, and I think the president was kind and gracious to them. I think it was good that that did not turn into a big photo op, that did not turn into kind of a big media moment. That was more of the process of trying to move this White House forward, and I think those families feel good about having had the chance to tell their stories to the people who have a chance to make a difference. Listen, I agree with the level of frustration. The pieces that are being put in place now are not adequate, but they are in the right direction.
Also is more than Barack and Joe did. Now, not everyone was happy with the president's executive order. Democrats accused him of not going far enough. Why did you say that to President Barack Obama and Vice President forgetful Joe Biden? And the media mob, they were upset that race didn't play a more prominent role in the order. Moments ago, White House advisor J-Ron Smith responded to that. Let's take a look at what he said.
You can't really fix the heart of people, but you can fix individual pieces that deal with the real problem, which is access, opportunity. If you talk about the police force, it's about having a police force that represents the community. When you talk about education, it's about access to education. When we talk about access to capital, it's about access to capital. And those are the things that we're really dealing with.
By the way, as the president says at the end of his rally, as he crescendos, we are one glorious nation under God. We are one American family. All of our citizens, all of you, we're one family. We're all important. I believe all children of God. And that's why President Trump, that's why he passed prison reform. That wasn't Barack and that wasn't Joe. It was President Trump who got nonviolent first offenders out of jail. Again, not Obama, not Biden. It was President Trump who offered clemency. Remember that moment 2 years ago, Alice Marie Johnson. That was not Obama. That was not Biden. It was President Trump who pardoned Angela Stanton King. Not Barack Obama, not Joe Biden. It was President Trump who massively increased funding to historically black colleges and universities. Again, they had 8 years. Obama, Biden did nothing. It was President Trump who developed a special tax-free opportunity zones in low-income neighborhoods. Again, Joe and Barack, they did nothing. It was President Trump that oversaw what was the greatest economic surge for every American demographic, all Americans. That did not happen. Just the opposite happened under President Obama and the forgetful VP Joe Biden. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment, African American youth unemployment, record low unemployment after record low after record low. Now, pre-corona, but look at the early numbers. Things are bouncing back quicker than I thought they ever would. It's President Trump who's getting back on the campaign trail to connect with voters in person at rallies. It's not Biden. It's Terry McAuliffe. I'm fine with him staying. He's fine. He only sees 2 people a day. He's 2 body guys. Let him stay in the basement. He's terrified, apparently, to live in his house. Oh, by the way, there's some in the mob and the media and others. They don't want the president to have a rally, and they're going to go with a lawsuit. I read it. I said, okay, there's a simple solution. Just call it a protest. Nobody will complain. They're claiming that the president's upcoming rallies are putting lives at risk. But, of course, they had zero problem with the mass protests all over the country the past 2 weeks. Many Democratic politicians, even the closed down everything Governor Whitmer of Michigan, she even participated. Well, maybe the president just call the rally a protest, then everything's fine. The media won't criticize you. He could call it a protest against socialism or a protest against the, well, forgetful Joe. Either way, as the election nears, it's important to ask, who do you trust to get the economy back on track? They failed for 8 years. Let's see. 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, lowest home ownership rate in 50 years, worst recovery since the 40s, and accumulated more debt than every other president before them combined. Wow. And it disproportionately impacted, minority communities. Who do you trust? Who will you trust to fix America's cities? Who do you trust to improve policing and end the unrest? And do you trust the ever-confused Joe Biden, who has been in the Washington swamp? What has he done in 40 years? He has little to show for it. You trust President Trump, who moved at lightning speed to make the country a better place and kept his promises. That was refreshing. In 140 days, I'm beginning to feel the urgency. I can't decide this election, but you can. You, the American people, you will be the ultimate jury. Your decision will impact this country for decades to come. And I'm saying, based on what they are saying and proposing that we all know that has failed, this country will be unrecognizable, in my opinion, for our children and grandchildren if, God forbid, they win. I wrote a book. It's coming out August 4th. You can go to Amazon.com, Hannity.com. The reason I wrote it is because this is the tipping point. This is the moment. Everything's at stake here. This is not a game. You want the country freedom and liberty? That's the country that will be existing under Donald Trump. You want the country of failed socialism? You'll get that under forgetful Joe.